So here I am measuring the width of the front cover and the height and the spine, and then what I've done is I've added a centimetre to the height and width, and actually that was way too much. So I corrected my measurements. I watched a video on here and used her measurements to help me, and she adds 7mm to the height, 3mm to the width, because then that gives you 1.5mm either side, plus the 5mm gap that you will see a little later on. So I cut these boards out, I draw it onto Davy board, some cardstock, just plain cardstock, and I glue the spine into position on the cardstock, and this is going to create that sort of like flap, if you like. So you do need quite a lot of glue, but not enough that's going to saturate the card and then make the card so wet that you can't work with it. So I have like a bone thing. It's not actual bone, it's like plastic, and I just score down the sides. You can see here that I put a centimetre gap in, and that's way too much also. So it means that my book cover, when I created it and when I made it and sort of square it all out, is super huge, and the distance between the spine of the book, the block, the text block, and the spine of the cover was massive. So I did have to redo it, and I made the boards smaller, and I made the gap 5mm. I then let this dry. Again, I'm just really smoothing that down, making sure that everything is adhered together, making sure that all of the card is in place, and I'm just checking to make sure that my text block fits in there well. And I've noticed that actually it's huge. So the next step is to take the front cover off of my book, and sometimes this breaks people's hearts, me not so much. I ripped a page there and felt bad. Just checking again that the size seems okay. I thought, oh crikey, I've just wrecked this. Try and get some of that excess glue off without causing too much of a mission. And then what I do is I get some end papers. These I got from a store cupboard at work. However, you can get them from Amazon, you can get them from eBay, any sort of the places like the Works and stuff like that. You could get them from there. I made a bit of a boo-boo here because I drew around my book and measured around my book on the pretty side, and that was silly. And I also folded my card in the wrong direction. What you want to do is you want to fold your card inwards so that the image for your end pages is facing inwards, and then you want to measure your book out. And I did it slightly larger than the text block itself, but actually really you want it to be the same size as your text block. So I'm just trying to square it up, cutting it off with my Stanley. Again, squaring it up, cutting it off, checking the size of my text block. It seems to be, as you can see, it's just a little bit too big. So I sort of tried to cut around it, but that wasn't really working. So then I had to try again. And then I had to refold it because obviously I'd folded it in the wrong way around. I'm labelling my spine, top and bottom. And then what I will do is I will label, again, just notice that the end is just a little bit too big. And I will label that it's the top front or the top back in a second. So I'm just cutting down that second end page, making sure that trying to make sure that it's nice and straight, but looking from this angle, it's obviously not. Checking that it would be the same again. really putting pressure on that cork. It's really helpful to have the cork because it really stops it from moving around. Checking my end pages match, labelling my fronts, about whether it's the front or the back of the book. And then I'm just getting a little bit of PVA and I'm just covering the ends. I've got a spatula here, it's like a silicone brush. So it's really easy to keep it clean. I just literally let it dry and peel it off and it's great. Just applying a little bit of pressure onto here. So then my ends are going to attach to the front of my book and the back of my book. Only a very small amount of glue. You don't need loads of glue because actually it doesn't stick. If you've got too much, it won't stick because you have to sit there for a long while. So I just apply a little bit of pressure. And I've chosen this colour of ribbon for my bookmark. I have attached it, or I will attach it, to the bottom of the book because I wanted a charm. So depending on how you want your bookmark to go, if you want it to go from the top all the way through to the bottom, you can sort of lift it from the bottom, then you attach it from the top. But if, like me, you want a charm, then you have to feed it in from the bottom all the way through the book and out the top and then down the front. I'm just putting it in my press now. This is a homemade press. It's literally just 2 planks of wood and my husband got 4 big bolts and we bought some wing nuts and from B&Q, a couple of quid a pack, nothing major, and making sure that my text block is, like, the spine is sticking out slightly so that it's applying pressure. However, when I put it in the block, it sort of pushed all of my end pages and I had to take it back out to level my end pages back up. So it was a bit of a faff. But I eventually got it sorted and was able to put it back into, desperately trying not to show you the end, but I got it back in the press and kind of lined up, but I still had gluing and whatnot that I needed to do. So now, as you can see, I've got the edge of my text block and I've got some mole here. It's just a bookbinding mesh. Again, I got that from Amazon also. And that meshing came with all the things that I needed. So I've got some book ribbon ends that I've got. Again, I will link that all in the description where you can get everything from. I'm making sure that the width of the mole is quite a lot wider than the book itself because that will give strength and stability when attaching the end pages onto the front cover or the hard cover. Loads of glue. Loads and loads of glue on here just to really strengthen and stabilise that spine. Making sure everything's as straight as it's going to be. And then pushing down that mole. Again, loads more glue just to really work it in. Once the mole becomes wet, it becomes really like... it feels a little bit like noodles, so it becomes really sort of stretchy and starts to move around quite a lot. So you have to be careful with how much you work it because otherwise you'll stretch it out. So I've started to notice that the ends, my book ends, the end papers are coming away from the actual book itself, and I was starting to panic, so I started to really fill that with glue. And then what I did was I pressed it back in the book press and just left it to dry. So here I have black suede. I've taken the cardboard Davy book board thing that I made earlier, and I've just cut off a section and I have made sure that I have an entire ruler width all the way around as minimum to ensure that it will wrap nicely. So make sure that it's square. I chop off the excess on the ends and on the sides. I only want it one ruler width, really. I don't want loads. I'm just marking where the edge of that new cover is going to finish, so that once I get it back on this, if it falls off or whatever, I can just line it up and it's super easy. I made a bit of a mistake here because I had the butcher paper that you can see, and I think I was protecting the suede, because this is a suede and it's really bitty, and I was checking the way that the grain went, because there was a certain way that I wanted the grain to go. And then you cut off the edges. I got a little corner cutter here that was in a pack which came with the spacer that I used to space the ends. And I'm just cutting off the ends and the corners to make it easier for me to fold inwards, so I can actually really wrap my book. It's quite a nifty little tool, actually. I really like this tool. I really didn't take my time with this. I did make a bit of a pickle of it, and I got a bit frustrated because then that meant that there wasn't really much for me to work with on the corners. So I removed that butcher paper because I didn't want glue all over my suede. I get some new butcher paper and really struggling to hold it all down like a dipstick. I turn my board over and lather up, not loads of glue, but enough glue. I need to really make sure that I get into those divots where I've got those channels, where I created those channels on either side of my spine, and then I press firmly and really, really work that glue into the book cloth. You have to be really careful that you don't use up too much glue, because if the quality of the book cloth isn't great, especially, and you use too much glue, then it will actually bleed through onto the other side. I didn't have that on this occasion. I've got a lint roller and I'm just sort of trying to clean it up a little bit because it's just all fluffy and it's a bit of a mess. And it was doing my head in a little bit. And I wanted to really make sure that I'd got everything down and in place. So with this one, again, I'm going in just very lightly to begin with, just making that board wet, so that it's really, really clear that there is product on there. And then I really work that glue into the board, and then just press with my hand and make sure that everything's really flat and firm, and then just run over it with my bone. It's not, again, vegans out there, veggies out there, it's not an actual bone, it's like a synthetic, but some people obviously used to have it a proper bone. And then doing exactly the same on the other side. You don't want too much product on the edge because it will ooze out the other side, it'll ooze out the edges, and you don't want that because you're not ready yet. So again, just really getting the product on there. You can't really see very well, sorry. Really getting the product on there and flattening it down with my hand, making sure all of the channels are creased in and the book cloth is really worked around the card and really worked into position, making sure that my lines are nice and that they're nice and crisp. Lint roller it again, just get rid of that fluff, bits of board and bits of dried glue and whatnot. So I'm going to need a clean piece of butcher paper. So I just turn it over, and then now I can guarantee that I don't have any glue. I'm not going to have any glue on my front side. I'm going across the long edge, and I'm going to try really hard not to move my book cloth. I just lift the end just lift that edge. Doesn't matter too much if you get glue on your hands and then on the inside, because it will be covered by those end papers, but in this case that didn't happen, so that's always a bonus. I'm just again getting those channels in, using my bone to really smooth down those ends and those edges and get that adhesion. Not too far out to the edge. Again, once you press with the bone or with your fingers, it will push the glue, it will push that product out towards the edges, and you need to be really careful with that. So as you can see, not everybody is lucky enough to have a Cricut, but I am. So I did a design on my Cricut design space for the front covers. It is black on black, so I'm hoping, well, it turned out really, really well, so I was really pleased with it. But I just thought it was super, super, super sexy. So you can actually get hold of any designs that I have on my TikTok shop. So if you wanted to do this, then you can get everything you need in the links in the description, including the transfers, the heat transfers. You don't need a heat press or anything like that. You can use an iron with the steam option turned off. As you can see, I just chucked the spine off of the top of my Cricut. So this is weeding. This is what we call weeding. So I'm weeding out, I'm taking out the bits that I don't want, and then I'm just going to peel off all of the excess, which will leave the design that I want to keep. And you have to be quite careful. My blade on my Cricut machine was really blunt, so it took a little bit of doing, a little bit of working. Normally I would be able to just whip this off and nothing really would come with it, but I had to do a little bit of faffing just to make sure that all of the bits stayed stuck down. But once it's done, I'm able to line it up, and it looked really, really good. So I can sort you out a design, or if this is going to be the Night Court edition of the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I have a very specific aesthetic that I wanted for this. Getting the spine back there because I've got myself into a right pickle. Weeding out the front cover now of those, that very famous design that Feyre created on her drawers. I really enjoyed doing this. It was a really nice, and it's very, very simple. It's not a complicated design at all. Just super, super simple, nice and easy. Whip it all off. Sorted. I was really, really pleased with how this turned out. Super, super stoked. So just getting those last little bits that I couldn't get from pulling the larger parts. Just making sure everything's nice and tidy. And then I've got my front cover, and I'm going to lint roll it for like the ninth gazillionth time, and I'm going to line up all of my designs. Now I did when I made this and I ironed it all on, I was really silly, because what I did was I kept everything stuck on and ironed over each individual bit, and I ended up actually melting it, and I had to start all again, and I was absolutely devastated, heartbroken. I also reduced the width of the spine, and I reduced the width of the spacing in between the boards. So this is my final reveal. I changed the spine design as well to something a little bit more simple. And yeah, I am just so stoked. I painted the edges of this a little while ago. I'm not an artist by any stretch, but generally I am so pleased. Like when Waterstones brought out their night court version of this was what I was expecting to see. And I didn't get that, so I made my own. And my entire ACOTAR series will look like this, with this aesthetic. Since making this video, I put a charm on the end of that ribbon as well. So I'm so pleased with it. So thank you for watching, and I hope you will follow along with my journey of rebinding all of the ACOTAR series. Thanks. Bye.